Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us today for our program on the new space age. This is the third program in our Aspiration and Resilience series, where we've been exploring the aspirations of Arab youth and why we in the United States should care. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, for making this series possible. Today's program is special, and not just for space enthusiasts. What has taken place is in just the past few days, and what will take place on Thursday, could help us learn a whole lot about Mars and its ability to support life. I am really into Mars. The UAE's Hope probe and China's Tianwen-1 probe entered the Martian orbit a few days ago, and NASA's Perseverance rover will attempt to land on the red planet on February 18th. I hate saying attempt to land. It will land, right? It's going to land. We're certainly hoping these missions can provide valuable information about Mars, but could they also attract the next generation of visionaries into engineering and space? How are Arab youth and other young scientists viewing these developments? We've got a really fantastic lineup of speakers today. Astronauts, 2 of them, space agency chiefs, lots of them, students and a member of Congress. But before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillSpace. I love The Hill Space. That's maybe our coolest hashtag this year so far. We're broadcasting live, and we'll take your questions throughout the program. If you experience any trouble with the live stream, just push refresh the page, and hopefully that fixes the problem. We recently learned the Biden administration will continue both the Space Force and the Artemis program, the program that will send U.S. astronauts, the first woman and the next man, back to the moon. And in that endorsement, the administration has also echoed that the United States has its sights set on eventually sending American astronauts to Mars. Let's bring on our first speaker to discuss what we need in order to make all of that happen and how we can attract the best young talent. Congressman Frank Lucas of Oklahoma is the ranking member of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. His family goes back a century in Oklahoma. So does mine. Slightly out of his district. I'm from Bartlesville. But so we've got that. And, I know a lot of Bartians that are into space. So, Congressman, great to see you today. Thanks for joining us. Absolutely, Steve. Good to be with you. And for those who don't know Oklahoma, Bartlesville has trees. It rains over there once in a while. It's amazing. That's absolutely right. Congressman, let me ask you, I always like to ask people, I know you're ranking member of the, subcommittee on science and technology, and you've helped sponsor the RISE Act to promote more money into sort of research universities and science and whatnot. I always am interested in why you are such a policy wonk on this subject. What drew you to space and science? First off, Steve, I'm a land-grant university graduate, agricultural economics, but research, education, extension, informing and educating people. So it's my background from my undergraduate training. Science is the future of this country and of the human race. I'm old enough, Steve, I remember watching the Apollo landing on my parents' black and white television in 1969. Now, I was a little boy, but black and white, and we only received one TV station. I was 16 when the Viking landers, turned on the cameras on Mars the first time. So I'm part of that generation that watched Star Trek when it was first run. This is just a continuation of all those things we've done before, and it's where we go in the future. And a strong STEM program, bright young people engaging in engineering and mechanics and all of the sciences are not only how we got to this point, but how we're going to go forward in the future. So I equate science and the federal investment as determining what kind of future this nation has, and for that matter, the world. And I'm an eternal optimist. I'm a wheat farmer, so I'm optimistic if we'll invest in science, there's no telling what potential the future has for all of us. Congressman, I love that answer. There are a couple of cool things about today's program, including having you on it, but we've got some young people who actually worked on the UAE Hope Mars probe, both from Colorado, Arizona State University. We've got some folks from the UAE and other places that, they're in this world. Part of it. The other thing is we've got some astronauts involved, but just within the last 2 weeks, we're going to have the UAE Mars probe went into orbit around Mars. We've got China up with a probe, and we've got the United States again on Thursday. And I want to not do advertising for them, but any of you on Thursday that are not thinking about Mars, you can go to get Krispy Kreme and get the Mars edition of donut that day on Thursday. But we're going to be sending another rover into Mars. You get a sense that this is a geopolitical set of challenges as much as it is a science one when you look at China, the United States, the UAE. Your thoughts on that? Competition has always compelled us to move forward. I think back to Gemini, Mercury, for that matter, Apollo.
The old Cold War, the rush with the Soviet Union, competition with the Soviet Union helped drive us and them forward. I won't deny that that's one of the selling points now as we look forward. Now, in fairness to NASA, they've worked very hard on international partnerships, whether it's the Artemis Accord or trying to bring nations together to just participate in the Gateway program, things that would enable us to move forward in a transparent, peaceful fashion. That's ultimately how the off-world should be addressed, is in a transparent, peaceful fashion. But whatever it takes to focus Congress to get the administration to move us forward, we can't be starting and stopping, Steve, as we have for most of my life in the space program.
You mentioned the Artemis program. We have a lot of folks watching today who may not be tuned in to what that is. Can you share with us what the contours of that are and why it's so important to the United States?
Basically, it's going back to the moon. It's establishing a small space station around the moon that we can use to then work on the moon, come up and down from a port, so to speak. And it's the technologies that will be developed there, the skills that will be developed there, then that will enable us to go on to Mars. Because it's one thing to be a few days away from the moon and to be able to come home if we need to, or to be able to send resources. But when you're going to Mars, and depending on the orbit, a year and a half, 2 years away, you can't figure it out as you go. So Gateway and the effort to go back to the moon develops the skills to take us on to the next planet.
Congressman, one of the things that's happening, I've got the first astronaut of the UAE is going to be on the program shortly. We have an up-and-coming female astronaut in the NASA program who is going up soon, we think. And so in this, when you look at science and you look at the international dimensions of it, and you look at young people that are working, collaborating, I'm just interested in what you think about that and the international dimensions. I mean, the UAE is 50 years old and they've got, somebody in space, they've got a Mars probe. That's not an everyday thing.
In the complicated world we live in, it's one of those signs that gives me hope about our relationships around the world, and for that matter, into the future. We cannot underestimate the importance of being able to access great talent wherever it may be on the planet. The people who are required to do these sort of things, and the astronaut corps, whether it's the United States or like UAE's astronaut corps also, these are the best and the brightest men and women who have what it takes to do things that are beyond the imagination of most of us, and certainly beyond the talent level of most of us. It's inspiring, and I think it bodes well for the world, even though we live in complicated times in a whole bunch of other areas.
Now, Congressman, the President Biden has said that he supports the Space Force, that he's pro-science. Just to ask you bluntly, do you have any skepticism about those commitments, and how would you expect the president to prove his commitment?
In my adult lifetime, we've had starts and stops constantly, whether it was George Herbert Walker Bush's program, and then basically Bill Clinton stepped away, or George W. Bush's program. Basically, the Obama administration stepped away. The Trump program that's pushed forward. I hope my President Biden and his administration, and we'll ultimately see when they pick their NASA director, we'll ultimately see when they make their appropriations request, how committed they are to move forward. We have a tendency in this great nation, whether it's my very conservative friends or my very liberal friends, to be so inward looking that sometimes we can't see the big picture. And that's what the Science Committee is for. That's what my chairwoman, Eddie Bernice Johnson, and I are all about. And we're going to help, I believe, encourage and move the Biden administration to fulfilling the commitments that they've made so far. After all, Congress appropriates the money. Congress passes the authorizing laws. Presidents and administrations implement what we do. I hope we in Congress will have the good common sense to make the money available and to make sure the administration follows those authorizations that we're providing for them.
I want to go to a question from our audience, Congressman, but just really fast, I want to sneak in one more. Your committee, because I've interviewed Representative EBJ, Eddie Bernice Johnson, before, and I understand the National Science Foundation budget is within your purview as well. And when I looked at it, I was so surprised. It's like between $7 and $8 billion. And I mean, that sounds like such a small number when you're talking about competing with China, competing with other countries around the world. Would you favor, why not triple that number?
There are many of us who believe that in order to overcome the damage done by COVID-19 and to put us on the proper footing, because we've had a slacking off of public spending on research in the last 20 years. Though private industry's made up much of it, many of us believe that you're talking in the tune of maybe $26 billion in order to get us back on the right footing. And our, whether you want to call them competitors or friends around the world, are spending lavishly on this research.
Right.
They understand where the future's at. We have coasted so long on efforts that go back to the 1930s. If we continue to coast, we're going to wind up not only in the back seat, we're going to wind up on the side of the road watching them go by, so to speak.
I appreciate that insight. We have a question from David Ottolini. David?
My name is Dave Ottolini. I live in Silver Spring, and I'm a retired broadcaster and communications specialist. The question that I have for you today is, do you see a time when there might be one international space agency?
One international space agency, sir.
If you're willing to look far enough out into the future, I certainly think that is a possibility. That's probably not in the next decade or two or three, but when we start to step to the far planets of the solar system, when we talk about exploration onto other solar systems, the magnitude of the resources required and the timeline required is such that it will take a global resource commitment. But that's probably not in my lifetime.
Nor mine. Congressman Frank Lucas from the 3rd District in Oklahoma, the largest district in Oklahoma. It's great to talk to you today. I hope you come back. You should buy all your staff the Krispy Kreme Mars donuts on Thursday.
We'll be prepared.
Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.